"We don't need you," my daughter said, smiling as if she'd just delivered a punchline. Those were the last words she offered before she locked the door. I still hear the click sometimes, soft, deliberate, the sound of something being shut away for good. The air in that narrow bathroom was cold, smelling faintly of bleach and the wilted flowers the caterers had left behind. I pressed my hand against the door, expecting it to give, but the handle stayed firm. On the other side, laughter rose, glasses clinked, and my daughter's voice rang out, warm and bright for everyone but me. Madison had always mastered the art of sugar-coated cruelty. Earlier that afternoon, adjusting her veil in the mirror, she'd said, "Mom, maybe wait outside for a bit. You've done enough, really." I thought she meant I should rest. I'd been helping since dawn, tying ribbons, arranging bouquets, passing tissues to teary relatives, but the way she said enough made me feel like clutter she couldn't wait to sweep out of sight. She looked beautiful, of course, every curl pinned perfectly, lipstick the shade of expensive roses. I stood behind her in my simple blue dress, the one I'd ironed that morning until every crease vanished. "Do you like it?" I asked, hoping for any scrap of acknowledgement. "It's fine, Mom," she said, never looking up, "but don't stand too close during pictures, okay? The colors might clash." The words cut deeper than she saw. I told myself it was nerves, wedding day tension. But then she turned to smile at the makeup artist, and in the mirror, I caught the quick roll of her eyes, the look of a woman who saw her mother as something to manage, not cherish. By the time guests arrived, I convinced myself it would pass once she walked down the aisle. I sat quietly in the back, hands folded, watching her glide forward. She didn't meet my eyes. Her father would have been proud, I thought. After he died, I did everything I could to be both mother and father. That's what mothers do. We show up, even when staying hurts. After the ceremony, Madison approached with a too-sweet smile. "Mom, can you step into the side hall for just a moment? I need you to freshen up before the photographer starts calling families." Her tone was polite. Too polite. I followed her, foolishly thinking she wanted a quiet moment, maybe a picture, maybe gratitude. Instead, she guided me into the small staff restroom. The door closed behind me, then came the click of the lock. At first, I thought it was an accident. I knocked lightly, called her name. "Madison?" Silence. Music drifted in from the reception hall. Laughter, applause, the microphone humming to life. "Let's raise a glass to the bride and groom," someone announced. I pressed my ear to the door, then I heard her voice, clear, glowing with charm. "To the woman who shaped me," she said. My heart rose. For one impossible second, I thought she meant me. But her next words cut clean and bright. "Ethan's mother has been such a guiding light. I wouldn't be here without her." The room erupted in applause. Someone called for a photo of the two moms together. I pressed my palm against the cold metal and whispered her name once more. Nothing, only celebration. I sank to the tile floor, the chill seeping through my dress. I waited for someone, anyone, to notice I was missing, to care. No one did. Time blurred after that. The muffled waves of celebration rose and fell. Music, laughter, silence, then more music. Once I heard her say, "It's been perfect." That word, perfect, echoed until it felt hollow and cruel. Somewhere between night and morning, I stopped knocking. My hands fell still in my lap. A realization settled in my chest, not sharp with anger, but heavy with truth. She had planned this. It wasn't oversight, wasn't stress. She wanted me gone, erased from the pictures, erased from her new life. I thought of the years I'd worked 2 jobs so she could go to college. The nights I scrubbed boats at the docks, hands cracked and raw. The envelopes marked Madison's tuition I kept hidden in a kitchen drawer. Every sacrifice suddenly felt like a bedtime story told to a child who stopped listening long ago. When the lock finally turned the second morning, I didn't jump or call for help. The cleaning crew found me sitting quietly by the door. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of them asked, horrified. "I'm fine," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, almost serene. "I just need to go home." They tried to help me up, but I waved them off gently. My knees ached, my throat felt scraped raw, but I stood on my own. When I stepped outside, sunlight washed over my face. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd seen it. The parking lot was almost empty. Confetti lay scattered across the pavement like tiny paper lies. I walked to my car, my shoes crunching over gravel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Pain that deep doesn't use words. It settles into the place where trust once lived. Driving back toward Savannah, I kept my hand steady on the wheel. The trees blurred past, Spanish moss swaying in the wind like ghosts waving farewell. I thought about calling her, asking why, but then I remembered the way her eyes had passed over me earlier, as if she'd already decided I wasn't part of her story anymore. So I drove on. The road stretched long and empty, the sky cracking open with morning light. Somewhere between Tybee and home, I whispered. Not a promise, not a plan, just a truth. Something's ended, I said softly. And I think it's me. But what I didn't know then was that something else had begun. Not rage, not yet revenge, but a stillness so deep it felt like freedom waiting to take shape. The hardest part wasn't what happened at the wedding. It was realizing it hadn't started there. The betrayal had been dripping into my life for years, slow, quiet, the way a roof leak goes unnoticed until the ceiling caves in. Looking back now, every step that led me to that locked bathroom door began long before Madison ever slipped a key into it. After my husband Michael died, it was just the two of us in that little house near the port in Savannah. His illness had taken him quickly, cruelly, before we'd even had time to understand what was happening. I remember sitting at the kitchen table afterward, Madison's small hand in mine, telling her, "We'll take care of each other now." She nodded through her tears, those big eyes of hers full of trust, and I believed her. For years, that belief was the engine that kept me moving. I spent my days typing shipping schedules at the port office, the clatter of keyboards and the smell of diesel hanging in the air. At night, I scrubbed the decks of charter boats, the salt stinging my hands raw. My clothes were always damp, my back always aching, but none of it mattered. Every spare dollar went straight into the envelope marked college fund. I skipped new clothes, doctor visits, even dinners. Sometimes I'd watch her sleeping, the fan humming softly above her bed, and think, if I just keep going, she'll never have to struggle like I did. When she was little, Madison was sweet, affectionate even. She'd sit at the counter while I mended her school uniforms, swinging her legs and chattering about her friends and teachers. "When I get married, you'll stand next to me, right, Mama?" she'd ask, and I'd promise her yes, always yes. Back then, I thought love and effort were the same thing, but everything shifted once she hit high school. Suddenly, everything about me embarrassed her. My job, my accent, even the way I held my purse. I'd ask about her day, and she'd sigh or say, "You wouldn't get it." She wanted nicer clothes, newer phones, trips with friends whose families lived in houses with pillars and manicured lawns. I tried to keep up. When I couldn't, she'd exhale in that quiet, cutting way that made me feel as if I'd failed an exam I never knew I was taking. I remember one awards night in particular. I wore my best dress, an old floral print I'd kept carefully pressed for years. I thought it looked lovely. She saw me in the hallway, her face tightening with panic. "Mom, couldn't you have worn something else?" she whispered, teeth clenched. I looked down at the dress, smoothing the fabric with my hands. "This is all I have," I said softly. She thanked the teachers, collected her certificate with perfect poise, and didn't say a word to me the entire drive home. The older she grew, the more polite she became. And that was worse than any argument. Anger has edges. Politeness is smooth, cold, and final. "You've done so much, Mom," she'd say, in that tone that meant you've done enough. When she went off to college, the phone calls came less and less. I sent care packages, money, even extra groceries when I could. She'd send a short text, "Thanks," and nothing more. I told myself she was busy, that she was growing, that she'd find her way back. Then she met Ethan. For a brief moment, I hoped things might change. He was charming, came from a warm, tidy sort of family. They visited once, and I made my best roast chicken. After dinner, she pulled me aside. "Mom, next time maybe use real cloth napkins," she whispered. "They notice things like that." I nodded, smiled, pretended I understood, but her words sat inside my chest like a stone. When she and Ethan moved into my house before the wedding, she called it their starter home. She'd walk through the rooms I'd spent 30 years paying for, pointing out everything she planned to change. "This wall has to go," she declared one night. "We'll knock it down and open up the space." I told her the wall was load-bearing. She smiled at Ethan as if I hadn't spoken. "We'll figure it out." Later, I heard her in the kitchen. "Once the remodel is done," she told him, "Mom can stay in the back room. It's small, but she doesn't need much space." Her voice was calm, practical. She was rearranging my life like furniture. I stood in the hallway holding a basket of laundry, unable to step forward or back. That was the first time I realized she wasn't planning to build a home with me in it. She was planning to tuck me away, quietly, neatly, until I blended into the walls. I didn't confront her. I folded my clothes, moved into that small room before she even asked, and told myself it was temporary. But the house sounded different after that. Her footsteps made me flinch. Her laughter, once my favorite sound, felt hollow, echoing through rooms I no longer recognized. Every word she spoke from then on had two meanings. "You're the best, Mom," when I fixed something. "You don't have to help," when I offered. "We'll take care of you," when I asked where I fit into their future. All of it meant the same thing: you're not needed. By the time the wedding came, I had already vanished in her eyes. I just didn't realize how far she was willing to go to finish the job. The day after Madison's wedding, the house felt smaller, tight around the edges, airless in a way that made my chest ache. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the invitation still pinned to the refrigerator, its silver lettering catching the morning sun. Madison and Ethan Wallace. The names stood bold, proud, expensive. Mine wasn't anywhere on it. No hosted by, no acknowledgement at all. I'd never noticed that before. Somehow that quiet omission hurt more than being locked away for 2 days. This house had once been my triumph. Every nail hammered, every patch of paint smoothed, every bill paid on time. It was all me. When Michael and I bought it, the mortgage had felt like an impossible mountain. We signed those papers with trembling hands and enough hope to fill every room. After he died, I carried that mountain alone. I climbed onto the roof in storms. I fixed the heater in winter. I planted flowers out front every spring so the place would greet Madison with color when she came home from college. I never imagined she'd see it as something to claim, not something to cherish. 2 days after the wedding, I heard her voice for the first time since the lock clicked shut. "Mom, you didn't have to leave the reception so suddenly," she said over the phone, her tone airy, careless. "People were asking where you went. You kind of made it awkward." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to tell her the truth, that she locked me away like an afterthought, like clutter she needed hidden. I wanted to ask her how she could do something so calculatedly cruel, but I knew what she'd say, that I was overreacting, dramatic, making things difficult, so I lied. "I wasn't feeling well," I managed. She sighed, bored already. "Okay, well, I'll stop by later. We need to talk about the house paperwork." "The house. Not home, not your house, Mom. Just the house, a thing to be processed." When she arrived that afternoon, she wore a crisp white blouse and oversized sunglasses, the kind that make every expression look faintly superior. She walked through the kitchen like someone inspecting a rental property. "Ethan and I were thinking about knocking down this wall," she said, tapping the painted plaster with one manicured finger. "Open concept, and maybe add French doors where the window is. It'd make a great entertaining space." I watched her gesture toward walls I had scrubbed, patched, and repainted for decades, walls that had held my life together. "You'll need permits for that," I said softly. "Mom," she replied, waving a hand, "don't worry about it. We'll handle it once the deed's transferred." Transferred. The word landed like a stone in my stomach. I had planned to give her the house someday, once she was settled, once I felt ready, but hearing it spoken like paperwork, like a foregone conclusion, twisted something deep inside me. "We haven't signed anything yet," I reminded her. She gave me a patient little smile, the kind people give toddlers who insist the sky is green. "You will, Mom. You said it was your gift." I didn't answer. She studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "You don't want to make this difficult." It wasn't a threat, but it felt like one. After she left, the house fell into a heavy, haunted silence. I walked through each room, touching the door frames, the corners, the photographs still hanging on the walls. Every memory whispered the same truth. I had given too much. My husband's laughter echoing in the hall, Madison's first steps on the worn living room rug, the nights I fell asleep sorting bills at the table. Everything I had poured into this place lived here. I had built a home. She saw a property. That night, rain began to fall, hard, relentless, beating against the windows like something demanding to be let in. I sat at my desk staring at the stack of papers in front of me. The deed, the bank statements, the automatic payments for her wedding, the utilities I'd quietly been covering for months. I had even been paying her car insurance without her knowing. She never said thank you. I never asked her to. But as the rain hammered the glass, something inside me shifted, subtle, like a door cracking open. I thought about the first time I learned that love could erase you. I was 9 years old. My mother, exhausted and uninterested after my father died, told me I was too much work. I remembered the look on her face as she packed my things into a cardboard box. "You'll be fine," she'd said, the same words Madison used now. I had promised myself I would never make my child feel unwanted, but I hadn't realized how easily the promise to never hurt someone can turn into the promise to let yourself be hurt. The next morning, I got dressed, put on my good coat, and drove to the bank. The teller recognized me. I smiled and told her I needed to make some updates. I closed the joint accounts, canceled every automatic payment, froze the funds that tethered me to Madison's bills. I walked out with a cashier's check in my purse and a quiet calm in my chest, like the moment before a storm finally breaks open. 2 days later, I called a realtor. She didn't ask questions. She simply walked through the house with her clipboard, nodding approvingly. "The market's hot," she said. "You'll have offers within a week." She was right. 10 days later, a retired couple from Atlanta handed me an offer for a little over $200,000. I signed the papers, packed a single suitcase, and left the keys on the kitchen counter. When I locked the front door for the last time, I didn't cry. I thought I would, thought the weight of 30 years might crush me. But instead, I felt something close to peace. Maybe you only cry when you still hope. I had none left. I didn't leave a note explaining anything, just 3 words on a scrap of paper. "Take care, Madison." When the Greyhound bus pulled away, rain streaked down the windows in thin, trembling lines. I watched the city fade, the diner where I ate lunch on work breaks, the pier where Michael and I used to sit on warm nights, the church where I buried him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going home. I was leaving it behind. I didn't know what waited in Charleston. I only knew this. I could no longer live in a life where I had to disappear to keep the peace. Madison could have her perfect image, her open concept dreams, her well-practiced smiles. I had chosen something she'd never understand. Freedom. The call came 2 weeks after I'd left. Savannah. My phone lit up with Madison's name, and for the first time in my life, I let it ring. I didn't answer. Not that time or the next. By the 5th missed call, I already knew what had happened. She had driven home. She had slipped her key into the lock. She had found strangers living in what she liked to call her house. I could picture her in the driveway, hand frozen on the doorknob, confusion turning slowly to disbelief, then splitting open into anger. I could almost hear her saying it. This was supposed to be mine. The thought didn't bring satisfaction, only relief. I hadn't ruined her life. I had simply stopped letting her use mine as a foundation for her own. That evening, the first text came through. "Mom, what did you do?" An hour later, "You sold the house? Are you out of your mind?" Then another, sharper, "Do you even care what this looks like?" She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't reflecting. She was grieving the only thing she'd ever truly valued, control. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the small balcony of my apartment in Charleston, watching boats sway gently in the harbor. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I expected guilt to creep in, but instead there was only stillness. For once, my life belonged to me. Over the next few days, her tone shifted. Anger softened into desperation. "We can fix this, Mom. Just call me." Then, Ethan's parents are furious. They think we lied. I could almost hear the panic threading through her voice. She had built her identity on appearances, on being polished, successful, admired. Now those appearances were cracking. Ethan called once. His voicemail was calm, practiced, condescending. "Ellison, this has gone too far. You've embarrassed Madison. You need to make it right." For the first time, his voice didn't make me feel small. I deleted the message without listening twice. Bits of news drifted in from friends still in Savannah. The Wallaces were trying to buy another house, but the bank had questions. Their credit wasn't as impeccable as they pretended. Madison's company had cut her hours. Ethan's promotion had evaporated. People whispered that their grand wedding had drowned them in debt. Once I might have felt sympathy. Now I felt distance, clean and necessary. I had spent my whole life worrying about her comfort. She had never once worried about mine. One afternoon, unpacking a box in my new kitchen, I found a small photograph tucked inside an old cookbook. Madison at 10, gap-toothed, smiling, her arm around me. We were standing in front of the same house she claimed as her own. For a moment, the old ache rose in me, whispering that if I'd done something differently, she might have loved me better. But I pushed that thought away. Love shouldn't have to be earned. That night, another message arrived. "You've destroyed everything. People are laughing at us. How could you do this to your own daughter?" I reread it, twice. Then typed a reply I never sent. "You did this to yourself." Silence, I realized, was the truest answer. In the days that followed, the messages slowed. The last one was brief. "I hope you're happy." And I was, not jubilant, not triumphant, just quietly, deeply free. My mornings in Charleston settled into a kind of ritual. I'd walk down to the pier with a cup of coffee, watch the shrimp boats heading out, and listen to the gulls sweep overhead. No one here knew me as Madison's mother. I was simply Ellison, the woman on the top floor with too many plants and a shy smile. I began painting again, simple things, boats, flowers, horizons, things that stayed where you put them. Sometimes I wondered if Madison drove past the house now, the house I'd built, the house she'd lost. I imagined her slowing the car, staring at the new curtains in the windows, the unfamiliar car in the driveway. Maybe she would understand then that what I had tried to give her wasn't square footage. It was safety, love, years of sacrifice she never saw. But some lessons can't be taught. Some have to be lost. There was still resentment in me. Not the burning kind, but the steady, quiet kind that stays. It lived in the space between every time she told me I wasn't enough and every time I believed her. I carried it not as a weapon, but as a reminder, never again to hand over my life to someone who saw it as theirs to mold. As spring settled into the city, the evenings glowed soft and golden, and music drifted through the streets. Sometimes I'd see mothers and daughters walking hand in hand, and for a moment, something inside me ached. Then it would pass. I had spent years chasing a love that came with conditions. Now, my peace belonged to no one but me. When I lay down at night, the harbor lights blinking softly through my window, I no longer replayed Madison's words. The anger, the guilt, the longing for her to understand, they had all quieted. What filled the space instead was something new, something warm and steady. I had stopped being a background character in my own life, and though the silence around me was heavy, it wasn't empty. It was mine. It was a quiet morning when the email arrived. The subject line read, "I think you should know." I almost deleted it, assuming it was junk, but something made me open it. It was from a man named Peters, the photographer from Madison's wedding. He wrote that he had seen what happened that day. "I noticed you weren't in any of the family photos," he wrote. "I asked about you, and someone told me you'd left early, but I remember seeing you in the front row. The way you looked at her before the ceremony, it was the kind of love people write songs about. You were the only one who looked at her that way." I read those lines 3 times. My throat tightened, not with grief, but recognition. Someone had seen me. Just once, someone had noticed. Then I deleted the email. I didn't need proof of what I already knew. That afternoon, I walked down to the open-air market near the harbor. The sky was a soft, washed-out blue. The air carried the smell of fresh bread and coffee. I bought a few groceries, chatted with the vendor about the coming storm, then took the long way home along the water. Every so often, Madison drifted into my thoughts. Her clipped tone, her perfect posture, the way she always watched me like she was afraid of becoming me. I wondered if she still lived in Savannah, if she ever drove past the house she'd lost, if she understood now why I had finally stepped away. When I returned to my apartment, my phone was glowing on the table. 23 missed calls, all from her. A text followed. "Mom, please, we need to talk." The words looked small, like they were shrinking under their own weight. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the balcony. The breeze off the harbor carried laughter from the street below, the chatter of families, the cry of gulls. It was warm, peaceful, alive. I thought about calling her back. For years I would have. For years my instinct was to fix, explain, soften, make her understand. But I had learned something in my quiet new life. Understanding doesn't come from explanations. It comes from losing what you believed you were entitled to. I turned my phone face down. My heart stayed steady. I wasn't angry anymore. What lived inside me now wasn't rage. It was something deeper, quieter, a bruise that had finally stopped darkening, the kind of hurt that time doesn't sharpen anymore. It simply softens until it becomes a part of you. I thought back to the day she was born, the way she screamed until I hummed to her. Even then, she needed control. Even then, she quieted only when the world bent toward her. I had given her everything, my time, my strength, my sleepless nights, my money, my years, and in the end she treated me like a memory she wanted erased. Maybe what hurt most wasn't what she did, but that she never once saw me as a person, only as the foundation she felt entitled to build her life on. Yet sitting above the water now, I didn't wish her harm. In some small, private part of me, I hoped she found peace too. Maybe one day she'd learn that love isn't ownership, that family isn't control, that a mother is not a resource, but a human being with her own life. Maybe one day she'd remember me not as the woman who sold her house, but as the woman who finally stood up for herself. The sun dipped low over the harbor, turning the water molten gold. Shrimp boats headed back in, nets glinting in the fading light. Laughter drifted from a nearby patio, light, unself-conscious. It sounded like a future. For the first time in years, I felt present, not waiting for approval, not apologizing for my existence, just here, alive. I glanced at my phone one last time before going inside. The last message she sent was still there. "I hope you're happy." I whispered into the wind. "I am." It wasn't defiance, it was truth. Inside, I placed the phone in a drawer beside the few photographs I'd decided to keep. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the city that had taken me in. Lights flickered on, one by one, across the harbor. Life moved forward. I realized then that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means stepping away so you can finally see yourself clearly. And as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, peace without permission. And if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever been told your worth depends on someone else's comfort, remember this. Walking away isn't cruelty, it's courage. And sometimes starting over isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you finally begin.